Can't hear you, Amy.
Okay, good morning and welcome to our middle school principal and AD meeting. I am Amy Boozer, Associate Commissioner here with the High School League, and I do oversee middle schools. And at this time, we're going to share our screen and begin the presentation. And as we're pulling that up, I just want to remind you, if you have questions during the presentation, there is a Q&A tab that is down at the bottom that you can utilize. So you can use the Q&A to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we will either answer directly back to you, or we will either answer to everyone that is in participation. And this meeting is going to be recorded, so you're able to go back and view the meeting at a later date if need be. All right, the next slide you're going to see has my contact information. And again, I do oversee middle schools here at the High School League. My contact information is listed here as well as on our website. We are in the office every day from 7:30 until 4 p.m. And so if you have questions that you need addressed, please do not hesitate to reach out. All right, Andy Rogers is our associate member representative. He is at Boiling Springs Middle School and he serves on the executive committee. He also serves as the middle school task force chairperson. We have a middle school task force that is made up of 12 other individuals throughout South Carolina who help address middle school specific issues. The most recent thing we looked at was adding the invitationals and how that would work. This year, we're going to look at sportsmanship with middle schools and how we can start recognizing some of our middle schools and their student athletes for sportsmanship. So if you have suggestions or anything you would like, please reach out to Andy Rogers to share that information, and he will share it with the task force. And before we get started, because this seems to be the hot topic question right here on our other meetings, so I just want to go on and address league passes. League passes, an email went out, I think Friday afternoon, to principals, athletic directors. It had a video on there kind of showing you what the process is going to look like for how your school will fill it out. Middle schools, you do receive 4 free passes, and then additional passes are a $25 fee, but it will be set up. You will select your school name. It will allow you to be able to submit emails that will be sent directly to the people getting the pass for them to upload. We're waiting on the last process or the last step, and that is the directions on how to upload the picture for the pass. So that should be coming out this week. But again, you'll get an email that will come from Keith Warren in our office to show you how you will be able to do your league passes for this coming up year. And with that, I am now going to turn it over to our commissioner, Dr. Jerome Singleton.
Thank you, Ms. Boozer. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We've got a lot of information we want to share with you. I will share with you that Mr. Rogers serves as your representative on the executive committee. And we look forward to providing you more and more and more and more. And your expectations of us should be higher and higher and higher and higher. So anything that we can do to help promote our middle schools to be better, we need to hear that from you. You need to tell us. You need to let Mr. Rogers know any area that you think we need to look at to make this experience for our middle schools better. We want to do that. You know, we started out with invitationals, a semblance of a championship. We're moving to what sportsmanship needs to look like. So as these student athletes progress and move to the high school level, this wouldn't be new to them. A lot of times our student athletes are introduced to interscholastic athletics or educational athletics for the first time once they reach high school. Well, I think we've got a great opportunity with all the middle schools that we have that has athletic programs that we can begin that process earlier, make it a smoother transition for those student athletes as we move forward. So I would encourage you, take advantage of the opportunity to use your representative on the exec committee, Mr. Rogers, and share with him. And even with the task force, you give that information to them, they can take it to the task force and come up with some form of proposal or solution to how we can make this a better experience for our student athlete. You're going to be shared a lot of information today. There are many of them that you'll be able to find in the league handbook, things that are day-to-day operation. But there are some areas that affects the South Carolina High School League, to include our middle schools, that was not created by the membership. This actually was created by state legislature that has an impact on the league and the functioning of the league. And the ones that I'm referring to is the State Department of Education had their budget approved for the 24-25 school year. Well, part of that are provisos that's in that budget. There have been provisos added to it year after year after year, and those provisos are never removed unless it's brought up by a legislator to have it reviewed and talked about and possibly being removed. So there's several provisos that are in the budget that continues to be there. Well, this year there was 3 others that were added that we want to look at that could be addressed. The first one, we come up with it. There's a proviso that speaks about no school, to include our middle schools, can pay dues to a state association that doesn't do certain things. And one of the first things they got listed that it has to do is, shift to the next screen, please. They have to have a process that if a school is sanctioned, the sanction cannot be enforced until the school has the opportunity to appeal any sanction that's placed upon them. And those sanctions being fines, those sanctions being suspension of coaches, suspension of athletes, those sanctions being probation or elimination placed on the school. So they have to have an appeals process in place, and one that will hold all sanction in abeyance until all the appeal process goes through. Of course, first appeal comes to the commissioner, which is myself, and if no relief is granted, they can appeal it to the executive committee, which is a body of your peers. And if they don't give any relief, then you can appeal it to a group created by the state legislature that's called the appellate panel. And then, of course, they become the final authority. But in order to for you to be a member of this association or pay dues as part of membership, we have to have something in place that if a sanction is imposed by the league, then if the school decides they want to appeal that, the sanction does not go into place until after the appeal. I'll talk a little bit more about this because that's going to be challenging for us. I'll talk a little bit more about it after I go through all of these. Okay, the next one. Given that schools at the middle school level don't do contracts, as it's not common that school at the middle school level don't do contracts. This will be one that will creates a contract for you. And basically what it says, if your school schedules another school to play a contest and you don't have a contract, then if one of the schools decide that they want to forfeit that contest and it's not for safety or health reasons, then they're going to be an imposed penalty. And the exec committee is going to have to create what that penalty is. An imposed penalty on the school that forfeits. And it must be a financial piece that equals to the amount that the school would have lost in paying for officials, because once officials are scheduled, depending on how late before you can cancel it, those officials still need to be paid. Lost revenue from tickets and lost revenues from concession. We've got to talk about that. We've got to figure out what does that mean, especially if the home team cancels instead of the visiting team. It says it has to be a uniform system that's going to be applied to all member schools. So we've got to create or figure out what that piece could look like so that it's equally addressed across the board, whether you're home team that's canceling or a visiting team that's canceling. We've got to talk about that a little bit. I'll share a little bit more about that as we go along. Okay, then the third one is that, again, they cannot have funds used and shared at a league or become part of an association that doesn't allow private school students to participate at the traditional public school of the attendance zone of where the student lives. So what it says is private school students can play back at the public school, traditional public school, in the attendance zone of where they live. Now, one of the things is that private school can't offer the sport that they're trying to play. But then there's a couple other pieces in place. Let's go to the next screen. The private school cannot be a member of the South Carolina High School League. Currently, there are 4 private schools that's a member of the South Carolina High School League. Those students are not entitled to go back and play at the public school attendance zone of where they live. Those students that attend that school. And the private school enrollment for grades 9 through 12 cannot exceed 200 students. How is that applicable to the middle schools? 9th graders don't play at the middle school. High schools don't play at the middle school. Well, this is applicable because middle school students that are in private schools can go back and play in the attendance zone of where they live, provided that middle school is part of a high school governance. Whether it's a private school, middle school that feeds into the private high school, or whether it's a high school that also includes middle school grades. Those are the students that are entitled to come back and play at the middle school attendance zone of where they live, meaning a standalone middle school, K through 8, that is not affiliated with a private high school. And when I say affiliated, being under the same governance, those students are not eligible back in the attendance zone of where they live. So it's very clear that if the school does not include grades 9 through 12 through affiliation or feeder system or part of the high school, then those students are not eligible to play back in attendance on where they live, just as those students that are attending a private school that's a member of the South Carolina High School League. Those have had some challenges also. The 200 students become part of the challenge. When do we look at the enrollment count for the grades 9 through 12? The exec committee is going to have to make some decisions on determining what date that will be, or will there be multiple dates? And we can see the challenges with the multiple date being, if you look at it at the beginning of the year, you could get one number. If you look at it at the beginning of the season, you can get one number, and then go to another season, you could have a different number, which means some cases a kid could possibly be eligible. In other cases, it could not be eligible. So we've got to standardize when will we look at the enrollment count for the grades. The exec committee's got to put something in place, and we'll share that with the membership once that's done, what that process will be, so that you can be able to address that as necessary. I told you there were some challenges to the others, so we'll go back to the other two, and we'll talk a little bit about those. The first is the appeal process being a stay. If a student is ejected or coach is ejected for an ejectable offense, which means by federation rules, they are ejected from a contest, there are sanctions that occur along with that, which means form of suspension. The ejection removes the coach or the athlete from the contest for the remainder of that contest. The sanction is any penalties that come beyond that, whether it be a fine or whether it be a suspension. Well, in some of our sports, the contests occur quite often, maybe in a couple of days between contests. Well, if the sanction is stayed, then those athletes or coaches are allowed to continue to coach as if nothing happened until the sanction has been appealed and a decision has been made. There's a couple challenges. The executive committee had been given some guidelines or some restrictions from the membership that says the exec committee shall not reduce any sanction below the minimum. So on certain sports, it could require a 1-game suspension for student athletes or a multi-game suspension for student athletes. So depending on the sport, it could be 1 game or another sport could be 3 games being the minimum. Well, if the exec committee doesn't have the authority to reduce it below that, if the violation occurred and it's agreed that the violation occurred, then they don't have the ability to set it aside. So that answer will be no. Then it would have to go before the appellate panel if they choose to want to go further with it. The appellate panel are not bound to what in the bylaws, but they pay attention to what's in the bylaws. The understanding is that if the agreed sanction is there, then there should be no opportunity to appeal those. The exec committee's got to make some decisions for the membership as to how that works. The sanction being stayed, depending on the sport, could have a negative impact on the operation of the league. Now, recognizing that if the sanction is upheld by all bodies, then if a coach coached or an athlete played, they did that in the form of an athlete as playing as an ineligible, and all the penalty that comes along with that becomes part of that. If the coach coached and the sanction is upheld, then you've got a coach coaching that wasn't supposed to be coaching, and we have to address that. So the stay creates some challenges, especially if the stay is to hold the minimum in abeyance until all appeals are heard. Anything that moves beyond the minimum is at the discretion of the committee to set aside, or the appellate panel to set aside, or the commissioner to set aside. But when it goes below the minimum, there's not discretion. Now, don't want to have it mistakenly addressed. You can appeal whether the ejection was warranted or not. Was the ejection by rule or was it not by rule? If the ejection was imposed and it was not by rule, then you can appeal that because you're questioning whether the ejection was imposed by rule. Now, everybody understands what the rule is because it's a National Federation book that explains what the rules are. But if the ejection occurred and it was not by rule, then that can be appealed, and the minimum shouldn't be applicable if the ejection was not warranted. Any questions?
There are no questions.
Okay. Was there any questions on the previous one about the private school and the 200?
No.
Good. Then, of course, the next one I want to talk to you about is this uniform system of figuring out, what is the penalty and what can be applied equally across the board for everybody. Again, you will have the opportunity, I think you would start out, if you created a contract, then you determine what the penalty shall be. That's a uniform system because the 2 schools that were involved both agreed. But in absence of one, and it occurred, then the league steps in and determines what the penalty or the fine or what monetary compensation you have to provide to the other school. Questions?
No questions.
Okay. A lot of these are more applicable at the high school level, especially when we talk about the uniform system for the member school, trying to discourage people from scheduling games and then making a decision not to play. And the decision not to play has nothing to do with health or safety. They're trying to discourage that because the student athlete misses out on an opportunity anytime a game has been scheduled and has been forfeited. Now, if you reschedule it, then that's not a problem. They still have that opportunity. But in the absence of that, you can't replace a forfeited game. That counts as one of the contests that you've actually won. Well, that's great on paper, but that does nothing for the student athlete. there's no questions. Just know that we're here for you. I would encourage you again, please press the league to provide more and more for you. And we just need to know what it is, so we can address that. You deserve that, and I think our student athletes deserve that. There are no questions. Know that we're here. Thank you for joining us. I'll turn it back over to Ms. Boozer.
All right, thank you, Dr. Singleton. Moving on with information we just wanted to share, help you get your year started. Original eligibility. So 7th graders, when that student starts day one with you, they attend their first school in 7th grade, that is when they are establishing their initial eligibility. So their original eligibility begins as a 7th grade student. They will be eligible at this school and the school that it feeds until they attend another school. So if they start in 7th grade and they go all the way through the high school that your school feeds, and that's where their eligibility is going to be. Okay, academic eligibility. Students that are passing the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades by academic promotion pursuant to your district policy, they are considered as having met the requirements for academic eligibility. When you enter that information on Big Teams, you will have the letters PA, so it means passing academically. That is what you enter for those students for their eligibility. If you have in the 2nd semester, you're just simply looking to see, are they passing? Are they meeting district promotion at the end of 2nd semester to determine if they are going to be eligible again. If you have a repeater, so if you have a 7th grader or an 8th grader who is a repeater, they are not going to be eligible if they met the academic promotion requirements during the previous year. We do have parents that are in the middle schools and they are wanting to hold their child back a year. So they cannot do that for that student to be eligible. They would be ineligible the entire year if a student is promoted academically and the parents are just wishing to hold them back. Now, if you have a 7th grader or 8th grader and they failed and they're not eligible, they can gain 2nd semester eligibility if they have satisfactorily passed the 1st semester work. So if they're meeting that district promotion at the end of that semester, they can gain eligibility for 2nd semester. And I see we did have a question pop up. I think once you put the information in Big Teams, it's going to come up as just a high school varsity team. But once you hit save, that should be changing to middle schools in Big Teams. So you are set as a middle school account. It's not going to show you the middle school at first, but once you enter the information and set it up, it will change to that after you enter your information. If you are still having issues with that, please reach out to our office and we will assist you with that. All right, eligibility. So you're getting, like I said, your 7th graders are new, your 8th graders you've had for at least a year unless they have moved into you. But this is information that you need to keep on file. Some of you are using Big Teams where you upload this information on their system, and that is where it is filed, and that is fine. That is definitely left up to our local schools. But you have to have their official birth certificate, just a simple copy of that, their physical, the parent's permission, the concussion waiver. Also, we just sent out the parental student eligibility waiver. So you should be getting that back from your students as well. That does apply to middle school students. So if you have not sent that home with your fall sport athletes, you need to send that home. And then any other submitted eligibility forms that you need to put on file. That is what you need to make sure that you have throughout the year. All right, let's talk a little bit about transfers. If you have a student that transfers in, so remember, if they start day one with you as a 7th grader, they are not a transfer. But if they come to you after the beginning of your school year, 7th or 8th grade, then they are going to be considered transfer students, and they should be treated as ineligible until that student is submitted on Big Teams. So if you have a transfer, they meet the transfer rule, you're going to enter that information on Big Teams. They must meet one of the criteria to be an eligible transfer, and this is in our bylaws, Article 3, Section 10. There are several different types of transfers. Some are more specific when it comes to high school than they are middle school. All transfer forms, these must be completed and entered into big teams before that student athlete is eligible to compete. So athletes who are not eligible, or if that big teams form is not complete, they cannot play in a scrimmage, a jamboree, or a contest. Yes, the eligibility waiver will be added to big teams. It was kind of sent out a little after the fact that all sports were getting started. But yes, that waiver will be added. And actually, it is added now for those of you that are using big teams for your parents to submit that information. All right, 2 requirements for all transfers. So if you do have a student that wasn't with you the entire previous year or moved into you as a 7th grader, you have to first find out, was that student eligible to represent the school from which they are leaving? Did they leave in good standings? Would they be eligible to participate in athletics? And then secondly, you have to see, did the student participate on an outside team in which a coach, including volunteer coaches, coached or had input into the selection of the outside team. So if they do not meet these 2 requirements, then they are not going to be eligible for A through N for a transfer. These are just some of the common transfers we see with middle schools. The bona fide change of address. Just want to remind you that means the entire family moves into your attendance area. It's not just one parent and the child moving and the other parent and the other sibling staying behind. It is the entire family unit moves into your attendance area, and the former residence is closed out. If you are in a school district that has multiple schools, you can utilize an intra-district for 8th grade only. And then non-member to member schools. Non-member to member, for example, could be if you have students that are coming from a homeschool association, could be those students if they were doing a virtual online charter and they've decided they want to enroll, those would be considered non-member to member. And again, these are just a snapshot of the types of transfers. You could have others. And I just encourage you to go and look at the transfers that are in Article 3, Section 10, because it does go A through N. So these are just the 3 that most commonly I deal with or have questions on when it comes to middle school athletics. And I do see we have a question about the second requirement. So if a student played on a travel team for a coach of your school, then moves to your school, they are not eligible. That is correct. They would not be eligible for that sport for 1 year. So whatever sport they played for that travel ball team, and it was prior to them enrolling at your school, like it was recent prior, we're not talking about 2 or 3 years earlier, they would not be eligible for that sport. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Charter school and homeschool students, they do have the opportunity to play back at the school which they are zoned to attend. There is a difference between charter and homeschool. So students who attend a public charter school that does not offer the sport, they are eligible to play back at the school they are zoned to attend. So this would include your brick and mortar charter schools as well as your online public charter. The homeschool students, same thing, they're going to be eligible to play at the school they are zoned to attend, but they must have been homeschooled for at least a year previously to be eligible. So they would have to have 1 year of being homeschooled sometime during their academic career prior to them being eligible to participate. And Commissioner Singleton spoke with you all about the private school students who are now also eligible to participate at the school they are zoned to attend. The private school is very similar to the charter school. As long as that sport is not offered, then they would be eligible to play at the school they're zoned to attend. And that private school have 200 or less students in 9th through 12th grade. Always just make sure you clarify, is the student doing an online public charter or are they actually doing a homeschool association? Because it is that difference. If they're not doing the homeschool association, or then they don't have to have that 1 year waiting period. And these are not transfer students. So do not think you have to enter them on the transfer form on big teams. They are not transfer students. All right, and I got one question. Yeah, if they're not a transfer student, and the question is if they are in your attendance zone already, and this is referring back to the coach that they played for, if they are not a transfer student and they're zoned to attend your school, then it does not apply. It's only if they are not zoned to attend your school and they're coming from another school to gain eligibility. All right, if there are no other questions in regards to your transfers, academic eligibility, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Kinney, our Health and Safety Director here at the office.
All right, thank you, Amy. Good morning, everyone. We're going to talk a little bit about health and safety initiatives in this year, what's required, and some other initiatives that we have at the high school league. First and foremost, the concussions. Again, some of you new to this, but concussions, if anybody exhibits any form of concussion, headache, blurry vision, any of those symptoms of concussion, they must be removed from play, first of all. If an official sends them off the field, if a coach sees that they're exhibiting any symptoms, they must be removed and be seen by one of these 5 healthcare professionals you see on the left here, which is an MD, a DO, an AT, a PA, and an NP. Once they're evaluated by one of these 5 people, if they're assessed and said there's no concussion, they can be returned to play. But if there is a concussion, they need to be cleared officially by an MD or DO only. So just the doctor, our medical doctor, and osteopathic doctor needs to clear them to return to play. Some other medical info, physicals. Every year, every athlete must have a physical, and this year that must be dated after April 1st, 2024. So March 30th does not count. It must be April 1st of 2024, and that's valid for the entire school year. So fall, winter, and spring sports, that will be valid for. And again, that's got to be after April 1st, even if they're new coming in. Something we pushed hard last year, we're going to push again this year. Make sure you have an emergency action plan. And that might be new to some of you, what an emergency action plan is. If that is, please send me an email. Just shoot me an email. I'll help you out with that. If help you develop one, if you need help with that also. But you should have an emergency action plan for each venue for all your sports. So if they practice somewhere and then play at a different area, that should be that EAP should be for each venue. We also do what's called emergency action plan practice week, and that's this week. So instead of just having an emergency action plan, we were going to practice that. So have your coaches go over it with all your stakeholders, your coaches, your administrators, even your athletes can be involved in that EAP practice week. And we want to practice that all week this week, kind of before we start getting games rolling in the fall season. Again, if you have any questions on that also, please shoot me an email. All right, some preseason plans here, and specifically say football here, really directed toward middle school. Your first practice in helmets only is going to be August 2nd. Again, that was last Friday or 2 Fridays ago. Helmets and shoulder pads will be August 16th. So you can put on those helmets and shoulder pads, and then full pads will be the first day of full pads will be August 20th. What we're doing here is we're acclimatizing these athletes to the heat, making sure that they don't just throw them out there with full pads on day 1. We can acclimate them, make sure they're as safe as possible. And you can find a lot of these or all these on our website under the health and safety tab. When you see that picture on the right here. Go ahead, Sarah. Heat safety requirements here. You are required to have what's called a wet bulb globe thermometer. It might be new to some of you. If that is, shoot me an email. I'll explain that, what exactly that is and what ones you can utilize for your athletes in your sports. What we're going to use this, and you see on the right there, it determines safety for heat. Where are your athletes? When they can go outside, what times they can practice, make sure they're as safe as possible. Something new last year, maybe the year before, there's some apps out there that say the wet bulb reading, they're not accurate. So unless you have a weather monitoring system tied to your school that has an app. We're not going to use any other apps besides those ones. Also, for football, you're required to have an immersion tub, a cold water immersion tub, in case there is a heat emergency. We can dunk them in there, and that's for practices and games. Another thing we kind of want to push this year, is not required, but we're asking you to do this, what's called a pre-event medical meeting. Your athletic trainers, admin, and officials can get together, go over the emergency action plan. You can go over any kind of emergency in case there is one, whether it be heat, whether it be concussion, it could be a neck injury. But we go over that beforehand, so everyone knows their roles when you have an emergency and what everyone can do. Finally, all coaches every year need to have these 4 courses, and this is from the NFHSlearn.com. They need to take the concussion course, the heat acclimatization course, sudden cardiac arrest, and protecting students from abuse. All 4 of those are required every year. So after July 1st, you go ahead and have your coaches do that, whether they're the head coach, assistant coach, volunteer coach, they need to have those done. Also required is CPR and AED certification, and that's every 2 years. I'm going to recommend the American Heart or American Red Cross for those. There's a couple online ones that do not have the hands-on portion, and you really need to have that hands-on portion in order to be considered a certification in CPR and AED. And finally, non-district employees, if you're the head coach, should have the fundamentals of coaching course as well. And that's what I have to talk to you about. If there are no questions, I don't see any. We're going to. There is one. We're using our Perry weather system, which is a wet bulb reading. Yes, you are. If that Perry weather system is attached to your school building, attached to your area, you're able to use that. Just not a weather app. There's a couple out there that are not attached to the school area. If not, no other questions, Sarah, I'm going to send it on over to you.
Thank you, Tim. All right, let's jump right into it. Open season. So these are the periods during your school year that you, outside of your regular season, can get with your kids, have practice, work on skill specific drills. So for fall sports, that is March and May. Of course, fall sports have already happened, so that is March and May of next year. Winter sports, you guys can get into the gym September this year before the season, and of April also in the spring. And then for spring sports, you all can practice with your kids in October of this year, and then of course January in the spring. Now we do have 2 different types of open season. So this is open season during the school year. There's also open season during the summer where you can also practice with your kids. And during that open season during the summer, you can compete. During these open seasons during the school year, you cannot compete. You can just get out there and practice with your kids. We want to make sure that you guys are aware the dates of Dead Week for next summer. During Dead Week, you cannot do anything. Maybe it's a little morbid, but what can you do when you're dead? Nothing. So June 29th through July 5th of next summer, you cannot do anything. This is designed for you to take a break, to allow your kids also to take a break. Nothing should occur with you, your team, during this dead week. Also, another note, competitive cheer, you can hold tryouts in May. So even though you have your open periods as assigned earlier, you can hold your tryouts in May. Next, let's look at closed season. So we talked about open season where you can get out and you can practice with your kids. During closed season, all you can do is lift and condition with your kids. Closed season is any time that you are not in open season, in your regular season, and also dead week. So closed season, you can condition and have your student athletes lift. So what are the violations? So you decide to get out there during closed season, you're in the gym and your kids are shooting. So what happens? So for the first day in violation, that first occurrence, there is a $500 fine. And actually, if you do it more than one day, there is a $500 fine per day. But first occurrence, 1 day in violation, your team loses 1 day of practice. You're limited to 1 preseason scrimmage, and this is new. So what you see underlined is new this year. The head coach and any assistant coach involved will be suspended from the first 2 contests. That was something that was added this past April by the executive committee, but the head coach and any assistant involved will be suspended for the first 2 contests. So 2 days in violation, or the second occurrence in that sport, you're looking at $1,000 fine, $500 per day. Team loses 2 days of practice, limited to 1 scrimmage. You cannot host any events and cannot be the home team in the playoffs. And of course, added once again, the head coach and any assistant involved will be suspended for the first 2 contests. For the third day, third occurrence or 3 days in violation, you're looking up to a $1,500 fine. Of course, that $500 per day. Your team loses 3 days of practice, cannot host any events, and cannot participate in the playoffs. And the head coach and assistant coach involved, once again, will be suspended from the first 2 contests. But with this third one, the school also has an option. And that actually, the option will end up replacing that the team cannot participate in the playoffs. So let's look and see what the school can also decide to do in place of this third, this 3-day violation that we have there. So of course, your third violation, 3 days, $1,500 fine, that remains the same. Lose 3 days of practice, cannot host any events. But instead of not allowing the team to participate in the playoffs or any postseason that you guys would have in the middle school, the head coach is suspended from 50% of the team's regular season and is not allowed to coach in that postseason that you all may have at the middle school level. So replacing that the team cannot participate in the playoffs with the coach being suspended and then the team not being able to participate in the playoffs. So your school would have that option. So the biggest question is it worth it? Is it worth it? And of course, the answer should definitely be no. Adhere to the guidelines, adhere to the dates for your open season and your closed season so that you wouldn't have to have any of these consequences. Are there any questions involving open season and closed season?
There are no questions.
All right. Booking fees. So we had a little bit of a change with booking fees for this year. So for you all, it would be $75 for all sports. I believe in the past it was $50. It has been increased to $75. You should be contacted from your local officials director for this payment. So make sure those are made to your local director. Something that has been instituted is a change fee. So if you go into Arbiter and try to change a game, maybe you forgot to input a game, within 15 days of that contest, it's going to result in a $10 change fee. And of course, once again, that would come from your local director. The only way that this change fee wouldn't be implemented if there was a cancellation due to something that was out of your control. Maybe some type of large team illness, weather, of course, those things are out of your control. But if you decide to go on, you just forgot to put in the game, you will incur that $10 change fee. And then once again, for scrimmages, there is a $25 fee to the local assigner per scrimmage. This isn't per official that participates in the scrimmage. It's per scrimmage. So that will go to the local assigner. So these booking fees, your individual officials director of your area should be reaching out to you guys in reference to these booking fees. But because this change, these two things with the increase in the fee and the change fee, we want to make sure that we inform you all of that. All right, let's talk a little bit more about officials. So we do recommend that you have certified officials for your contest. And once again, of course, those are assigned by your local officials director. Now, you can have contests called by others that are not certified officials, but make sure those are competent adults. High school students are not allowed to be used as game officials. So of course, we definitely want to recommend that there are certified officials, but if you don't have certified officials for those contests, be sure that you are using competent adults that know the rules of the games. When officials arrive at your facility, make sure that you have a clean and secure dressing facility for them to use. Oftentimes they'll come in, they're coming in from work. And of course, with the earliness of games, want to have an area that they can dress in. And of course, an area, depending on what sport it is, halftime that they can go back to. Also, you want to make sure that you have a plan for your officials. Make sure that the areas that they have to go to, you have security at your contest to, if you can at all possible, make sure you have someone that is able to escort them post-contest. We have had situations where we've had spectators approach our officials after contests. And definitely if you are getting your certified officials for the games, they may not want to come back. So make sure that you have a plan for officials post-contest so that there is not access to them from spectators. Now, I just want to talk a little bit also about the officials and, staying and leaving. And a lot of the times their treatment is a reason why they either stay or leave the profession. Now, a lot of our new officials, majority of our new officials, first through third year officials, they gain a lot of their experience, playing at the middle school level. So it's definitely important to make sure that the officials are treated with respect. Degrading, belittling, yelling at the officials, it definitely has no place in middle school sports. And we want to encourage you that if there is a problem, be sure to nip it in the bud as swiftly as you can. Take care of the situation. Don't leave it to the officials to say, hey, get this person out the game. Take care of that situation. We want you to remember what you permit is what you promote. So if you have a situation, spectators are behaving inappropriately, please take care of that situation as quickly as possible. We want to promote last year with our high schools. We promoted this initiative with the NFHS called the Bench Bad Behavior Campaign. And we want to promote this with you all also, because just as we mentioned earlier, a lot of our newer officials get their experience at the middle school level. And if they have a bad experience at the middle school level, they don't come back. And we definitely want them to stay in the profession. So this Bench Bad Behavior Toolkit, you can go to benchbadbehavior.com, download that toolkit. It is geared more towards your high schools, but there are still resources in the toolkit that you can use at the middle school level. There are PA announcements, there are flyers. There is a contract that you can have your parents and your student athletes sign to promote and promise that they will use positive behavior, good sportsmanship at contests. So we want to encourage you all to download that, use those resources to help promote positive behavior at your contest. And then also want to promote becoming an official, highschoolofficials.com. Challenge your parents. They're on your sideline. They're in the bleachers. Challenge them to also jump into the ranks of officiating. So those that are interested can go to highschoolofficials.com. And like I said, once again, I'll repeat it. A lot of our newer officials get that experience at the middle school level. So we want to have a larger pool of officials to pull from so that we can have them at your contests. Along the line of treatment of officials, we want to also promote our officials appreciation weeks. We will have one per season. Definitely encourage you all to show your appreciation to our officials. They're coming out there, ensuring the integrity of the game, making sure that our student athletes are safe, upholding the rules of each game. So definitely want to encourage you all to participate in our Officials Appreciation Week. Some examples of some things that you can do are listed below. You have your thank you notes, your PA announcements, signs. We had some schools last year that had their teams take pictures with officials, but definitely want to encourage you all to get involved, showing appreciation to our officials for the job that they do and allowing our student athletes to be able to compete. And last but not least, just want to talk a little bit about how do we handle concerns or issues with officials. So if you are able to film contests, what we want you to do is send a report, send those clips to your local director and copy us. So that we are aware of whatever issues or concerns there might be. Don't wait to send the information. Don't wait to send the information a month, 2 months down the road, or say, hey, we've been having this problem all year long. Send it to us as soon as it happens, because there are conversations that we can have. And then also our officials are definitely looking to get better and improve. So there is also a good deal of training that happens with our officials. So just like, those that have the ability to film, when you go in the room, study film with your student athletes, officials do the same thing. So definitely send us any issues or concern that you have. Send that to the local director and copy us. One last thing I do want to mention is about social media. Social media is definitely pervasive in our society nowadays. Everybody has a phone at the contests. So one thing that we want you guys to encourage when you're talking to your parents, when you're talking to your student athletes and coaches, to refrain from cutting, pasting different things, missed calls that happen at games, because of course our officials are human, and putting them on social media. That does not encourage those that are in the craft. That does not help anybody. So we definitely want you to encourage your parents, your student athletes, everybody with a device, to refrain from posting anything like that on social media. With that, are there any questions?
There are no questions.
All right, thank you, Amy. And with that, I will pass it over to Dr. Kurtrell Rodan, our Director of Educational Services.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I hope you guys are healthy, happy, and well. And so I'm going to be talking to you guys about ejections and sportsmanship. We are intentional here at the high school league about education-based sports. And so by educating you on ejections, as well as our leadership, community service, and all of the things, I believe that we can increase sportsmanship, leadership, and community service, and then we can decrease the unsportsmanlike behavior. So everything I tell you today, please make sure you're educating your parents, your coaches, as well as your student athletes on the consequences of unsportsmanlike behavior. All right, so let's go ahead and get to the ejections first. So when it comes to ejections, those are based off of NFHS rules and regulations. So making sure that your coaches have those books is one of the best resources that we can have. But once the ejection occurs, the school must submit an ejection report in a timely manner. That means like that evening, or at least by 12 p.m. the following day. That could be an AD, a principal, or the coach can submit. Please make sure you're adding film to your ejections. That's a great way to start that appeal process. This is how we get to see exactly what occurred on the field. So you want to put that, if you're advocating for your athlete, you need to make sure that you are adding those videos in so that we can see exactly what has taken place. So if a kid gets ejected, that kid must remain on the in the bench area, but they cannot return to play, and they are immediately ineligible until they are cleared by the high school league. And so that's why we're reiterating that you get that ejection report in as soon as possible, so that they can serve their suspension and the matter can be cleared. Okay. In the event that a student athlete is ejected for the second time, they will end up with an automatic 2-week suspension. And if there's an ejection within the playoff part of this season, it's a minimum of the next game suspension. Suspensions do carry over to the next season as well as the following year. All right, so this is where I need your help. And this is, I love middle schools the most, because this is where we're teaching our kids what's proper and improper, and that we're doing that in educational part. And so these are some areas where we're having the most difficulty with our student athletes. And so that would be violent conduct is number one. And so that's a place where we need that extra. I would actually practice with your athletes on how to manage to deal with anger, if that, or to manage themselves if they're in a high stress situation. Another thing is leaving the bench during an altercation. It is important that you have a strategy for your athletes who are on the bench. If an altercation happens, they need to stay put. And so that's another thing to make sure you're educating the student athletes on, is to not get involved. Once they are going toward an altercation, they are now involved, and they will also serve a 1-game suspension. Another area where we're seeing that are common ejection pieces or issues is verbal abuse, just profanity, whether it is said towards someone or just spoken. It is means for an ejection. That is an ejectionable offense. And so that a verbal abuse can be profanity toward others. It also taunting. These are things that could create an ejection. And then lastly, profanity and dissent toward officials. Like Sarah Hayes was just speaking about, it is not okay to speak to an official. It's even bad call. This types of stuff is inappropriate. The only person who is supposed to be speaking in any way in a respectful manner to your officials would be the head coach. All right, so if you have your cameras, please take a picture. I would educate coaches, parents, student athletes, because I think one of the biggest misconception is that we can lessen the minimum, but we cannot. So these are the minimum suspension when an athlete gets ejected. Okay, and so there is no appealing for a lower than the minimum. We at the high school league must uphold the minimum suspension. So if it is football, swim, lacrosse, or cheer, that's 1 game. For golf, cross country, volleyball, wrestling, track and field, that's a 2-game suspension. And then for basketball, baseball, softball, soccer, and tennis, that's a 3-game minimum suspension. Now it can increase based off of the severity of the matter, but that is the minimum. Oh, and lastly, ejections must be served at the level. Sorry about that. Ejections have to be served at the level in which it occurred, and until though that level has occurred, meaning if it happened at varsity level, then until they've served that suspension at the varsity level, 3 games, if it's 3, 2, or 1, they are not allowed to return to play. If it was at the JV level, they have to serve the minimum at the JV level, and so forth. All right, so now this is the difference when it comes to coaches' ejections. So it's still the same as far as the submission portion. You want to submit those reports as soon as possible in a timely manner. As soon as you find out, submit, add video, and when applicable. But in the coach's situation, that coach must leave the facility or stadium immediately, and they cannot return until the matter is cleared. Okay. And so for coaches, that's a 2-game minimum suspension. Once again, there's no reduction of that suspension because it is the minimum, and a $300 fine. Suspensions must be served at the level where the ejection occurred. So if it happened at a JV game, until they've served 2 JV games, they cannot return to coaching. So say if they coach for both JV and varsity, until they serve their JV, until they serve that suspension, they cannot go back to the field. And so ejected from the final game of the season is a minimum of $500. If it's a volunteer coach, then the suspension is for the remainder of the year in all seasons. All right, so now we get to talk about the leadership summit. So we are intentional about our middle school student athletes. We know that you guys are where we're going to really massage in leadership, community service, and sportsmanship. And we want that to happen at the middle school level so that by the time they get to the high school level, they are our leaders. And so I think we'll make the hugest benefit if we're already schooling or practicing those types of skills. So we at the league have a summit on September 19th, 2024. It will be virtual, where my hope is that our high school kids will be able to speak to our middle school kids about what it means to be leaders in their communities and things that they can do at the middle school level, projects they can do and ways in which they can serve their communities as student athlete leaders at the middle school level. So please make sure to put this on the calendar for September 19th. Make sure you're checking Choose News so that you can get the link for registration so that you can have all of your student athletes come and learn about leadership, community service, and how to be and sportsmanship and how to be great student athletes of tomorrow. Thank you so much and have a great rest of the year. And now I'm turning it over to you. Who am I turning it over to you? Who's next?
Thank you, Dr. Rodan. Thank you for that information.
Amy Boozer.
Yeah, it's coming back to me. It's coming back to me. But thank you. And yes, we definitely encourage you to get your student athletes active in that sportsmanship course that'll be coming up in September. That'll be a great resource for them. All right, we're closing out the presentation, but do want to cover some rules and regulations that are specific to middle schools. Students below the 7th grade, they may not participate in interscholastic athletics, and that is to include practices. So anyone below 7th grade, they should not be at your practices. A lot of times we hear schools where they're just a manager. Well, are they doing just manager roles, or are they out there dribbling basketballs and serving volleyballs and so forth? So understand that if they are below 7th grade, they cannot participate, and they should not be participating in practices either. Students who are in grades 7th and 8th, they are not permitted to participate on varsity interscholastic teams, and that is football, wrestling, lacrosse, and soccer. So they are only eligible for the middle school or sub-varsity for those contact sports. So again, that's football, wrestling, lacrosse, and soccer. Football is the only sport where a student cannot participate on an outside team while in season. So you cannot have your middle school players on your middle school team and they're playing on a travel team. That is against the rules and would be a violation. And practice in all sports, this is to not exceed 2 hours per day. So your practice times for all of your sports are not to exceed 2 hours per day. Make sure your coaches are following this for middle school. Your middle schools, you are allowed 1 scrimmage and 1 jamboree and 2 tournaments. Do want to make you aware that a jamboree is you will not play more than half of a regulation contest. So for football, you would only play 2 quarters. That would be your jamboree against 1 opponent. Some sports it works well with, those sports that typically do have quarters in them and are timed. For example, volleyball, that would only be 2 sets against 1 opponent to 25 points. So some sports, it may not be as beneficial for your school to do a jamboree. And you could trade in that jamboree to do an extra scrimmage if you wanted to go that route. Your tournaments, you can have 1 tournament, whether preseason or regular season, and then the second tournament would have to be like at the end of the regular season. Before the end of the regular season, you're doing like a region tournament. So if you have a region that you are participating in, that is when you can have that second tournament. And you can also charge for one scrimmage. So I have that on the slide right here. So you can also charge for one scrimmage. And like I said, the Jamboree, you can trade it for an additional scrimmage, or you can choose to have that Jamboree. If you have any questions on Jamborees for particular sports, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll be glad to assist. All right, there is an age limitation. So if a student does become 15 years of age prior to July 1st, then they are not going to be able to compete on an 8th grade team under any athletic activities. They would be considered enrolled in 9th grade for athletic eligibility purposes, and they would have to play up at the sub-varsity level, like at the JV team. But if they turn 15 prior to July 1st, they are not going to be eligible for your middle school teams. Advanced participation. So advanced participation is going to pertain to middle school students who are promoted to a varsity or JV team. So if they start out at the middle school and they are then promoted, they may not return to the middle school team if they participated at that level. What does participation mean? It is defined as being in the same uniform and permitted in the bench area of one of the competing teams. So if it's a basketball player and they dress and they're on that varsity bench, even though they did not get in the game and play, that is still defined as participation. So if you have a middle school student and they're pulling that student up to a JV team or a varsity team, they cannot return back down to the middle school. Now, if they started the year and they started with the varsity team or they started with the JV team and they're seeing they're not getting as much playing time, they can move them down to the middle school. So if they start at the higher level, they are able to come back down to middle school. But if they start at middle school, once they go up, they have to stay for the remainder of the year. All right, this is just a snapshot. This entire sports calendar is in the rules and regulations for middle school, but this is just a snapshot of your fall sports. Everybody started practice on August 2nd. We have scrimmage opportunities coming up for volleyball starting August 19th, football August 28th, and then you can see the first contests that are coming up and their last contest dates. But this entire calendar is on our website, and it's also in the middle school rules and regulations. So you can print that out and have it easily accessible for you in your office. Invitational. So this was one of the things that the middle school task force started 2 years ago, and we offer multiple invitationals in the following sports. So we have volleyball that will be coming up October 26th. We do have several locations that we offer the volleyball. We'll be working on that, getting sites finalized for this year. So schools will know where those sites will be. We do try to make it to where travel is not a major issue. I know we can't make it perfect for everyone, but we do try to do our best. Wrestling, the same. We do try to have multiple sites there. And then this past year, we had track and field at Lugoff Elgin High School. And just depending on the numbers, if we have more sign up for track and field and we see the need that we need to expand to an additional area in the state, we will definitely be doing that. But these are fun invitationals, kind of gives them a state championship-like feel. They are honored with a plaque and medals and so forth. So I do encourage your schools to get involved and sign up for these invitationals. All right, big teams. If you do not have big teams, or if one of your athletic directors or principals is not signed up or does not have permissions for big teams, if you would send an email to Brooke here at our office, you can see her email address is listed right there. Please include your school name, your name, and then your position, principal or athletic director, and we can get that taken care of. Most of you probably are set up, but just if you are not for some reason, please send that to us so we can get that taken care of for you. Book orders. We do have the NFHS book orders. The fall sports are here. I'm not sure if winter sports have come in yet, but they will soon. You can order this by clicking this QR code here that's in this presentation. So if you need rule books for your coaches, please order those from our office. And then you can also go to our website to purchase those as well. once we receive the invoice and everything or your order, then it will be processed and mailed to you. All right, this is our online directory. So you receive emails based off of you being on your school directory. So if you are a new principal and you're not receiving emails, you just need to look at your directory on the website and it will tell you who the administrator is. And that is the person that can go in, update from the former principal to the new principal. Once it has been updated, then that will have you in the listserv for the emails that go out from our office. So again, if you are not receiving emails, then your directory is not updated and we need to get that updated. Now, if you have questions or somebody was the administrator and they're no longer at your school and you can't get the information to access the directory, then definitely send me an email and we will get that taken care of for you. And just want to remind you that on the website, if you go to the schools tab and AD notebook, it is going to pull up the middle school rules and regulations. You can see they're listed right here with the handbook. I encourage your coaches to go there to look at what the rules are for their sports, the dates for their sports. Bylaws, that is where we cover academic eligibility, transfers. So encourage you to get in and see what's on that website that you can use and that can be beneficial for you as a principal, athletic director, and can benefit your coaches. And then I see we do have one question. The invitationals, they do not count as one of your tournaments. It's just an additional contest that you are allowed to play at the conclusion of your season. So it does not count as one of your regular season matches at all. So would not affect you there. All right, if there are no other questions, we hope this will help you get started this year. We hope you're all having a great start back to school. And if we can be of any assistance to you this year, please do not hesitate to reach out. Again, this is recorded, so if you need to go back or you need to share with someone else in your school, please do so. And we thank you and hope you have a good rest of your Tuesday.